just wanted to talk about solving trigonometric equations using reference angles. Now, this is the diagram that we're using here. So we have our four quadrants as we've seen before. Our first quadrant we have sine, cosine and tan positive. Second quadrant sine positive. Third quadrant tan positive. And fourth quadrant cosine positive. Now, one solution to a trigonometric equation, examples of which we see here on the left, can be found either by using a calculator or by using the maths tables where you have a number of special angles. From this one solution that you get, other solutions can be found using the graph of the trigonometric function in question, or by considering the quadrant in which the angle lies. Now, if we just look at our example here on the left hand side, we have our first trigonometric equation, cosine theta equals minus root 3 over 2. So the first step in solving that is to find the reference angle. Now the reference angle is an angle between 0 and 90 degrees. It just helps us to figure out where a starting point or a reference, that's why it's called a reference angle. So in this example here, to find the reference angle for that particular question, I would do cosine inverse of root 3 over 2. I would ignore the minus sign to find the reference angle. So when you do that on your calculator, you would find that the angle we're looking for is 30 degrees. So our reference angle is 30 degrees. And the next step then is to establish whereabouts cosine is negative, because ultimately our answer here is negative. Okay, cosine is not negative in the first quadrant. The cosine is negative in the second and third quadrant. So if we just make our way over to the second quadrant and stop where the reference angle, I have this done, reference angle of 30 degrees. How did that, where did this come about? Well, how we did it was we looked at the horizontal, which is in this case is 180 degrees, and subtracted the reference angle, and that basically brought us back 30 degrees into this quadrant, and that turns out to be 150 degrees from 0. Alright, so the reference angle allows us to find this 150 degrees, which is actually one of our answers. So that's one answer. Then we move on to the third quadrant and we go 30 degrees into that quadrant as well from the horizontal. And this 30 degrees, you add 30 plus the 180 and you get 210, which is shown here in green in the center. So our two answers for this is 150 and 210 degrees, because if you put cosine of 150 into the calculator, you will get minus root 3 over 2, or its decimal equivalent, and cosine 210, you get the same answer. Okay, so that's the two answers for that one. Moving on to the second one, sine of theta equals a half. If you once again do sine inverse a half on your calculator, you'll find that once again our angle, or coincidentally our angle, is 30 degrees. So sine of 30 degrees is a half. The question is, because our answer is positive here, which two quadrants is sine positive in? Sine is positive in the first and the second quadrants. So 30 degrees happens to be one of our answers because that's in the first quadrant. But we need to move across to the second quadrant where the reference angle is 30 to find our second answer. And our second answer in this case, just in the previous answer, is 150 degrees. We found that by subtracting the reference angle 30 from 180 to go back 30 degrees into this quadrant, the second quadrant. Alright, so if you check that on your calculator again, sine of 150 is a half, sine of 30 is also a half. So there are two answers there. On to the third one, tan of theta is minus 1 over root 3. We find the reference angle. So if you do tan inverse of 1 over root 3, you'll get 30 degrees again. Okay, so 30 degrees is a reference angle. The question is, whereabouts is tan negative on this diagram? Tan is negative in the second and fourth quadrants. So we move into the second quadrant. Okay, and once again, tan of 150 gives us minus 1 over root 3 on your calculator, or the decimal equivalent. How we got that was we subtracted 30 degrees from 180, and that brought us back in here. Then we move across to the fourth quadrant, and we move up here to 30 degrees, and the reference angle is still from the horizontal. So in this case here, you're subtracting 30 from 360, which gives us 330. So our two answers in this case here are 150 and 330 degrees. So that's how you would solve trigonometric equations using reference angles.